setup of the Trobada, we ended up doing this lunch with some talks and then a round table. And we do it at the very beginning of the year so that we welcome the new faculty. We get to know the new coming so that they present some work.
Overall, we're publishing well. We're being recognized for it. It's 32nd in the world according to REPAC, 9th in Europe, #1 in Spain.
This year we had gone through the accreditation process, the official accreditation process for 2 of our master degrees, and we want to thank you very much for this.
What is the relationship between familiarity with the market experience, familiarity with the decision environment, and automatic psychological processes? Familiarity can be important for market behavior, in a way because it affects unconscious analogical thinking, and because it can affect perception of alternatives.
I'm going to tell you about my research on developing tools that we can use to measure the effect of geography on economic outcomes. And what we find is that the model does a reasonably good job at predicting where people move over time. So what I find is that railroads were responsible for 23% of US growth before the Civil War.
I focus on information asymmetries, in particular that the government does not know the workers' productivities and has to decide the optimal income tax to redistribute income. But in many economies, we also have a big shadow economy. I'm working to build a theory for policy implementation that basically can acknowledge that agents use their limited knowledge and experience to assess the effects of policy.
I'm going to tell you that the way we're doing national accounting has been changing over the last 10, 15 years. And that has given, rise to a change in the labor share behavior. The way that ours are responding to productivity shocks themselves, those dynamic multipliers, those partial derivatives are changing quite a bit. What we are doing now is basically we have a model that tries to take all these things into account.
This year we have a small topic about the future of Europe.
Banks play a much more important role in Europe than they do in the United States, okay? And in particular, equity seems to play much less of a role than it perhaps should. You're helping the banks through the governments and the governments through the banks. It seems to me it's evident that this is not necessary. This is not a good idea. In terms of bank risk sharing, perhaps banks should be encouraged to acquire equity positions in other banks. You should have consolidation of banks across countries. The lender of last resort and deposit insurance should probably be moved to the euro level as opposed to the current national or messy way which is done. And then in terms of the sovereign bank embrace, perhaps the lender of last resort should be more direct to banks.
Over the last, 10, 15 years, there have been large amount of intra-EU flows, particularly coming from the east to the west, I guess to the south to the north as of late as well. It is also then reasonable, also as international economists, to think about looking across different countries' experience, which I'll get to later, about the potential benefits and losses from migration. And they actually find the punchline is immigration to the UK since 2000 has been a substantial net fiscal benefit, and in particular for intra-EU flows. In terms of longer-term issues, more immigrants, and I touched on this at the beginning, may erode the willingness to redistribute income, contribute to public education, healthcare, pensions, and this just raises a host of political economy questions one want to think about it for immigration.
If economists think that there's, many things to like about the EU, well, it has defects, etc., why are voters so unhappy? And the answer to this is quite simple. They're unhappy about economics and they're unhappy about immigration. It will not surprise you that 92% of Greeks and 65% of Spaniards think the EU is not dealing with European economic issues well. Will we see a switch from austerity to pro-competitive reforms? I think we need it, but you have to ask yourself, why should we see it now? Because the IMF has changed its position. I don't think that really matters a lot. And I think you have to keep in mind this is potentially a very interesting area for research. We've known for a long time, and we have yet to be proved wrong on this prediction, that feasible macro adjustment is regressive.
I would like to thank very much the panelists. I would like you to join me in thanking them.